The most important thing in the history of music is the perfect fifth.
Sorry, what?
We don't know when the first perfect fifth happened musically. They happen all the time in nature. In fact, every time you speak, what you say is happening very quietly, a perfect fifth above the octave you're speaking at. That's just part of nature, and we'll cover that in another video about something called harmonics.
It's actually a perfect 12th.
Shut up.
Well, it is.
Yes, it is. But that's not important right now.
And it's actually happening even quieter, a perfect 19th above, and even quieter than that, a perfect 26th above, and you can hardly even hear it, a perfect 33rd above.
Nice. Really nice. We do know from the Old Testament that brass instruments are very old, and you can't play a brass instrument without fairly quickly stumbling upon a perfect fifth. So, the perfect fifth as a musical idea is at least 3,000 years old. But our understanding of the perfect fifth really took off 2,500 years ago with a guy named Pythagoras. Yes, that Pythagoras, of the theorem, nemesis of secondary school math students everywhere, lover of triangles. I promise I won't say hypotenuse. Damn, said it. Sorry. Well, aside from his casual interest in mathematics, Pythagoras also lent his cognitive flexing to music, and he is credited with the creation of the first scale made up entirely of perfect fifths. If you know what a perfect fifth is, that statement is probably more confusing than if you don't know what a perfect fifth is. A perfect fifth is an interval where the two notes in question are 7 semitones away from one another. So, if you stack just two of them, you're already past an octave, and scales always happen within an octave, don't they? Yes, hold that thought. So, Pythagoras came up with the whole 7 semitone thing then, right?
Yeah. But
Yes.
no, but yeah, but
No.
no, but yeah, but
Sort
no,
of.
But,
We do.
Yeah.
Let's stick with no. But yes. The Greeks were mathematicians, all of them, frighteningly good mathematicians. Look up Archimedes, or Eratosthenes, or Jeff. Not Jeff so much. So, Pythagoras started looking at the mathematical properties of music, 'cause, you know. And he played around with ratios. If you take a string and divide it into the simplest ratio, 1 to 1, you're cutting it in half. That produces a frequency twice as high. Because the string is half as long, it vibrates twice as fast. Still with me? Josh, over there in the corner. Question?
Yes. I don't get it.
The frequency change is the inverse of the length change. So, if it's half the length, 1 over 2, it's twice the frequency, 2 over 1. You take the change in length, flip it over, and that's the change in frequency. See? Maths is fun. Woohoo! Well, as fascinating as this whole doubling the frequency thing is, you actually just end up with what sounds like the same note. I started with C, I've still got C. Just, higher. So, we go to the next simplest ratio, 2 to 1. Now we've got the string stopped at 1/3 its length, so 2/3 of it is vibrating. So, what's the frequency change? 2/3 the length, so 3 halves the frequency. 2 over 3 becomes 3 over 2. Got it?
Oh, I still don't understand.
Okay, and we've got a new note. This note is a perfect fifth from our first note. So, if we start on C, we're now up to G. Like all good Greeks, Pythagoras just couldn't get enough of a good thing, so he just kept going. It was a perfect fifth free-for-all. In our musical alphabet, we next get to D, then A, then E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp. A sharp is the same as B flat. From B flat we get to F, then, lo and behold, we arrive back where we started at C. Sure, it's 7 octaves higher, but we're back at our starting point. And to get there, we went through 12 notes. This is why our music has 12 notes. Because of Pythagoras and his perfect fifths. To get every note we use, all you need is a perfect fifth. Well, 12 of them to be precise. One concept gets you all the principal notes in Western music. But wait, there's more. Not only do we get all our notes, but we get most of our scales too. It's like one of those buy one get one free sales. How? Well, let's go back and look at those perfect fifths a bit more closely. We start on C, G, D, A, E. Now we stop. We've got 5 notes. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to put them all in the same octave. In scale order, they spell and sound C, D, E, G, A. This is what's known as the pentatonic scale. I'm not an ethnomusicologist, but I don't know of any cultures, either geographically or historically, that don't make use of a pentatonic scale. It is the basic scale, and it's the first scale produced by stacking perfect fifths. Coincidence? I think not. And you don't just get that pentatonic scale, you get all of them. Grab any 5 adjacent fifths, and you have a pentatonic scale. Let's start on B flat. B flat, F, C, G, D. Unscrambled into an octave, you get B flat, C, D, F, G. Boom! If we continue adding fifths to our C stack, we next add the notes B and F sharp. Now, we've got a 7-note scale. If you're thinking it's everyone's favourite 7-note scale, our old friend C major, you'd be, well, wrong actually. Disappointingly, it's C Lydian. For reasons we'll get into another time, the problem with the Lydian scale is the location of an interval called the tritone. The devil's interval. Mwahahaha. It's got a ratio of 45 to 32. Sounds like this. Tasty. Well, when our ancestors started building scales, they wanted the tritone to frame the main note of the scale. That is, one note of the tritone had to be just under the root, the main note of the scale. C is just under C sharp, not a note of our scale, but F sharp is just under G, which is a note of our scale. So G is our main note called the root. So let's look at our C Lydian scale. C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. Here, our tritone, C to F sharp, is framing the note G. So, putting the notes in scale order, starting on G, we get G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, or a G major scale. So, if we grab any 7 adjacent notes, the second note is the root of the corresponding major scale. Again, we'll cover the tritone in future. For now, just know that every major scale can be constructed by grabbing 7 adjacent perfect fifths. This will tell you what notes are in the scale, including any sharps or flats involved. In our previous G scale, the note F was actually F sharp. And remember, it's the second note of the group that is the root. Let's do another. Let's find the notes of an E scale. So, we need E to be the second fifth in our stack. A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. Unscrambled, we get E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. Et voila, E major. Partly this is musical geekery, but it's also a good way to understand some fundamentals. And when someone hits you with the circle of fifths, you'll understand that it's not some random collection of notes designed to torment you. It is the most important thing in the history of music. It's the foundation of everything. If you want to stick around for some next level geekery, we'll continue after the end credits. Hey, thanks for sticking around. I wanted to talk to you about something, but didn't want to confuse people who were already feeling a little bit... So, here's the thing. Perfect fifths? They're not perfect. If you stack them up on top of each other, you start to get into problems. Because they're a little bit sharper than you'd want them to be. So every perfect fifth you add gets you a little bit more sharp by about 2 cents. 100 cents equals 1 semitone, so we're talking about a minuscule shift. When you play them as a stack on their own, it's practically impossible to hear, because each note is only a tiny bit out of tune compared to its predecessor. But actually, by the time you get back to your starting note, you've gone through 12 notes. Your final note is 24 cents sharper than your starting note. And that is audible, especially when you put them in a single octave. This big gap at the octave became known as the Pythagoras comma. which was insulting. You can imagine the bullying. Hey Pythagoras, nice comma. It's basically a fancy way of saying, crap, something went wrong here. And this problem persisted in music for a long time. I mean a long time. After about 2,000 years, yes, 2,000 years, we finally agreed in the West on a system of tuning called equal temperament. It's basically a way of understanding how all the fifths were brought into line. So, strange but true, we knocked music out of tune in order to make it in tune. I know. I know. But at least Pythagoras was finally free from his albatross-like comma. He was also dead, but, still. If you've tuned a string instrument by ear, especially a guitar, you probably have had that feeling of having completely nailed every string pair. You get to the end, and you triumphantly strum a chord. And it sounds like hell. And you go into fits of anxiety and self-abuse and wonder why you ever thought this music lark was a good idea in the first place. All you've done wrong is to follow physics. Where you tune to by ear is always going to be a bit off because you're not adding in the fudge factor of equal temperament, and slightly detuning by ear is really hard. Which is why God invented digital tuners. Thank you! If you really want to hear the difference between Pythagorean tuning and equal temperament, you need to listen to the notes together. What we're going to listen to is a chromatic scale, meaning all of the 12 semitones sound. Notice how some of the notes are very close and others are really out of tune. If you haven't done something like this before, when a note is out of tune, you hear the difference in frequency as what we call beating. It's like the note is going wah 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 wah. The faster the wahs, the more out of tune the note. So as you listen, try to focus on the beating between notes. So, there you have it. A Greek mathematician invented a 7-octave group of notes using one interval to create all the notes and most of the scales we use by creating something that taught us that tuning perfectly by physics gets you music which is out of tune, so you need to knock everything out of tune in order to tune everything properly. I literally don't get why people say music theory is confusing.